Welcome to another sewing adventure. Well, technically this is the first sewing adventure that I have a video of, but welcome. In a previous video, I made a pattern for what I'm calling a modern walking skirt, based on its intended function of being mobile rather than off of some historical context. Seeing as this is the first pattern I've ever made myself, I need to make a mock-up. As a beginning sewer, like myself, mock-ups can be a lot of work, so I might as well make this mock-up into an actual garment. Because I'm going to put all this effort in, might as well get something useful out. So for the fabric for my mock-up, I'm using this fitted sheet that I got at a thrift store. It's a really nice cotton. Here I'm just seam ripping to figure out how much fabric I have, although I could have just cut this off and saved myself the trouble, but oh well. Now it's time to trace out my pattern using tailor's chalk. I feel so professional using tailor's chalk. I've never used it before, but it was quite fun. The pattern that I made is net, which means that there's no seam allowance, so when I cut it out I need to add the seam allowance, and I'm using this guide to do that. Once my pieces are cut out, it's time to assemble. Here I'm matching up both chalk lines and pinning them in place. The machine I'm using is an old white. Well, technically it's black in color, but the brand is a white sewing machine. And it was my grandmother's, now it's my dad's. As you can tell, I'm still figuring out how to orient the pins for the most effective sewing experience. Once I finished piecing all 10 panels, I tried it on and found that it was too tight across the hips to allow for free leg movement or comfortable sitting. So I trimmed off the top 3 inches of the skirt so that the flaring of the skirt would start higher and would allow for more free movement. In retrospect, I could have taken a set of darts out of each of the seams so that the skirt would just sit higher. I plan on doing something similar for the fleece version of this skirt, as I want that one to sit more at my waist than at my hips. I didn't want to deal with a zipper, so the only closure for this skirt will be a button, where the opening for getting into the skirt will be hidden within the pocket. This pocket shape is a little different than the traditional pocket shapes you might have seen. The flat bit at the top is going to be attached into the waistband to stop any weight put in the pockets from dragging on the side seams. Instead of the pocket scooping away from the seam after the bottom of the opening, it will remain attached to the seam. This will hopefully prevent anything in the pockets from continually banging into my legs while wearing the skirt. I don't know how pockets are typically assembled, but here I sewed each pocket to its respective side of the skirt, then seamed the sides together and sewed the skirt seam up to the bottom of where the pocket opening would be. So apparently my camera wanted to get a shot of me instead of the ironing. Because I wanted the pocket openings to lie flat, I top stitched along the front side of the pocket opening. I wanted these stitches to be as invisible as possible, so I did it by hand. This is probably my first foray into hand sewing, and I thought I was making the tiniest possible stitches, but then I learned how to hem and made much smaller stitches. Next, I attached the waistband, machine sewing along one side, then folding it over and whipping the other side in place. The hand sewing portion of this I did late at night and therefore have no footage of because there was no natural light. I also don't have any footage of making a buttonhole and attaching the button. This was the first time I made a buttonhole by hand, and I was surprised at how easy it actually was. At this point I set aside the project for a bit, and even wore it out unfinished. Finally, I decided to hem it. I ironed out the bottom and trimmed the hem even. These fabric scissors were my grandmother's, but they may have gone a bit dull over their many years of use, so I should probably get them sharpened. I didn't bother ironing the hem allowance up. I just eyeballed it and pinned it section by section as I went. My goal was to make it as invisible as possible, so I tried to only catch 1 or 2 threads from the skirt as I worked. This was quite difficult as this sheet was actually quite a high thread count, but I'm very happy with the result. It was amazing how much improvement in my stitching I could see from where I began hemming versus where I finished. I'm quite proud of my hemming job. The last thing to do is the finishing work. I put bar tacks at the base of my pocket openings and the hidden opening in the pocket on the left side to help prevent the ripping that could occur at these high strain locations. I also finished the seams of the pockets by cutting down one side of the seam allowance and turning and felling the other side down over it. I left the main skirt seams raw, as I'm not that worried about it fraying. I can always finish those later if I really need to. And with that, my skirt is done, or as done as it's gonna get. Now it's time to go on a mini adventure with my new skirt. I've worn it a bunch and like it a lot. It's still a little tight in the hips when sitting, which puts an unnecessary pressure on the pocket seams. But it is perfect for walking. After all, it is supposed to be a walking skirt, and I love how it swishes around my legs. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in seeing more content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe.